Today, what I want to do to kind of wrap things up is talk about something very important in my view, which is what the Democrats are trying to do with making Washington, D.C. the 51st state of the union, and also their goal, or at least the goal of many leaders in the Democratic Party right now, and I think long-term it's the goal of most Democrats, is to pack the United States Supreme Court. That is to say, to make it go from 9 justices, where we've been at for 152 years, up to 13 justices. Because they need to add 4 in order to get a liberal majority once again. Because now, at least theoretically, you have a conservative 6-3 majority. You would have it 7-6 if you packed the court. Tomorrow, that is Tuesday, I will have a column in the Washington Examiner. My tentative title, at least what I proposed, is Democrats are trying to lure Americans into their power grabs. You never know what they end up actually deciding to run with. But make no mistake, last week, the House passed on purely partisan lines a bill to make Washington, D.C. the 51st state. Now, this is something that Democrats have been angling for many years now, and they see an opportunity to really push for it, especially because not just that they have control of the House of Representatives, but because they feel the need to, in order to really get a permanent power structure for their side of the aisle. Because right now, think about it. 50-50 Senate split. The only reason that we have a Democrat majority in the U.S. Senate is because Kamala Harris is vice president and she's on Team Blue. If Donald Trump had won, then it would be a Republican Senate. Bottom line, it's a 50-50 split by the American people. A 50-50 split in the Senate. The House of Representatives is the closest that it has been in nearly 2 decades as far as a majority for either party. That is to say, it's the tightest that it has been. The Democrats don't have much of a majority, no matter how much Nancy Pelosi would like to think that she does. Given this dynamic, you have to think about the politics of the thing and whether or not it is woefully unwise for Democrats to march forward with this 51st state idea. Of course, they want to do this because that will give them an additional vote in the United States Senate, 2 votes in the Senate, and an additional voting member of the U.S. House of Representatives. But it's really the Senate that's key. And by the way, in the Senate, there are 44 Democrats who currently are on board as co-sponsors of their version of H.R. 51, which is the Democrats' bill, again, passed in the House along completely partisan lines. Think about this. There are a few reasons why Washington, D.C. should not become a state. Despite the argument that one may have, which is, well, there are hundreds of thousands of Americans in D.C. who are disenfranchised. Over 700,000 Americans in D.C. who don't get to vote for Congress, don't get to vote for the U.S. Senator. So why shouldn't they have a say? Why shouldn't they get to vote? Well, the answer is twofold. Washington, D.C. is not like other regions. Unlike Puerto Rico, unlike the Virgin Islands, unlike Guam, D.C. is literally a city. It's not a territory, and it's not like an ancient city-state. You think of Athens, for example. It's not like that. Historically, every state that has been admitted into the Union was either an original colony, it was a territory, or it was part of the state. West Virginia comes to mind. It's also the Federal District of Columbia, and for a reason. Federalist number 43 was written by James Madison, known as the father of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And he argued that the nation's capital needs to be independent of any state. That's because it cannot be reliant upon any state. It must not have any dependence upon a member state. Carving out the National Mall, and that's what they're proposing in this bill, to basically take the National Mall and make it a sort of Vatican within a new state, isn't going to cut it. It's not going to reach that objective. And it is woefully unconstitutional, especially when you think about the 23rd Amendment, which gives Washington, D.C. 3 electoral votes. You need to repeal that. It's in the legislation to repeal it, but it's going to take time, and it needs to be approved in order to make at least that aspect of this thing constitutional. Other scholars have written about the number of reasons. There are several for why D.C., it would be unconstitutional to make Washington, D.C. a state, but those are just a couple of key points. Now, if the goal was simply to enfranchise Americans, there are others who've made this point. I think it's a very important and valuable one. You should perhaps consider giving more parts of D.C. to Maryland. Alexandria and Arlington in Virginia were previously part of that District of Columbia, then they became part of Virginia and broke off. If you really want to just enfranchise more Americans, why not do that? Why not allow more of the city of D.C. to be included in Maryland? Well, it's because it's a power grab. That's their real objective. The goal of the Democrats here is not simply to enfranchise more Americans, to give them the vote for Congress. It is a power grab so they can have 2 additional senators and make for a greater majority in the United States Senate. But it doesn't stop there. Then we've got the court packing desire. Let's go to Jerry Nadler. He is the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and he's one of the lead sponsors on this proposal to make Washington, to do the Supreme Court. That's what I'm looking for. When you got these power grabs and they're all up in the air and they're trying so many things, sometimes you mix them up. When it comes to packing the Supreme Court, this is what Jerry Nadler had to say in making the argument. You see, it's not really packing the court, it's unpacking the court.
Our predecessors made eminent sense when they pegged the size of the Supreme Court to the number of judicial circuits. As our country has grown, so too to the Supreme Court. 13 justices for 13 circuits is a logical progression. And that is another reason why I'm glad to join my colleagues in introducing, not a nice number, it's a proper number. It matches the number of circuits as it has historically. And it also will enable us to do justice and to rectify the great injustice that was done in packing the court. And some people will say we're packing the court. We're not packing it, we're unpacking it. Senator McConnell and the Republicans packed the court over the last couple of years, as Senator Markey outlined. So this is a reaction to that. It's a necessary step in the evolution of the court, and I'm proud to co-sponsor.
Jerry Nadler, we're unpacking the court. Folks, he just wants to bring balance to the Supreme Court so that peace and justice and harmony will reign supreme, and it will be magical. Just unpack the court, he says. Republicans are hypocritical because they're the ones who packed the Supreme Court. Well, okay, there are 2 things going on here. Number one, you have the idea of packing the Supreme Court and whether or not that's a good idea. And number 2, Republican opposition to packing the court. Is that simply rank hypocrisy? Let's address the first one first. President Biden, back in the 1980s, when he was a United States Senator, on multiple occasions over several years, liked to talk about and wax philosophical about the role of the judiciary and the need to not pack the court, why it was a bonehead idea. Take a listen. This is Biden in 1983, then Senator Biden.
President Roosevelt clearly had the right to send to the United States Senate and the United States Congress a proposal to pack the court. It was totally within his right to do that. He violated no law. He was legalistically absolutely correct, but it was a bonehead idea. It was a terrible, terrible mistake to make, and it put in question, for an entire decade, the independence of the most significant body, including the Congress, in my view, the most significant body in this country, the Supreme Court of the United States of America. The president had the right to do that. He was totally within his power. and his objective was seen clearly.
It was a bonehead idea, said then Senator Biden. Now that he's president, he hasn't come out in support of packing the court, but he has created a commission to examine the idea of judicial reforms, to include the possibility of court packing. Now, in another address in 1987, Biden highlighted what the Democrats in the Senate Judiciary Committee had concluded about FDR's court packing idea 50 years before his speech. And in that, he talked about how the commission strongly opposed the idea of packing the U.S. Supreme Court. In fact, the Senate Democrats on this Judiciary Committee called it an invasion of judicial power such has never been before been attempted in this country. Again, an invasion of judicial power such as has never before been attempted in this country. That's what the Democrats said in rebuking then Democrat President FDR for court packing. It is a bad idea because it delegitimizes the Supreme Court and causes Americans to distrust the court. Now, you see on the screen Neil Gorsuch. He was Trump's first appointee. He had that opportunity as president of the United States at the time in 2017 because Republicans held up Merrick Garland's nomination. He was then able to nominate and have confirmed by the Senate Justice Brett Kavanaugh and Justice Amy Coney Barrett. You see her on the screen. He had that prerogative to make those appointments. In fact, he ran. In 2016, he ran on a ticket to appoint constitutionalist justices on the court to the point where during the primary, towards the tail end of the primary, when he realized he needed to shore up the conservative base of the Republican Party, he presented his first list, I think, of 11 potential justices to the bench. I think a couple of them ended up being on the Supreme Court as he continually added to that list over time. He didn't need to do it. He felt he wanted to do it because it would be a good way to shore up conservative support. It was a key part of his 2016 agenda. He was elected president. He had that opportunity. The Constitution gives the president the prerogative to make judicial appointments, including to the Supreme Court. It's not packing if it is something that is common practice authorized in the Constitution and the right of the president to do so. And when it comes to the United States Senate, U.S. senators have the opportunity to make a determination when a president nominates as to whether to confirm that individual, or even if they're in the waning days of a lame duck administration, to decide whether or not to move forward with the confirmation process. In 2016, Republicans decided not to do that with Merrick Garland. That was their prerogative. It is not packing the court if you're just following what you're able to do, what's permitted, what's been done in the past, and the right that you have in, say, the Senate majority, especially when it was a sacrosanct campaign promise. Last I checked, Joe Biden didn't give a definitive answer on whether or not he wanted to pack the court. Same thing here in Colorado, where I am, with Senator John Hickenlooper, who doggedly refused to give an answer, and he still does to this day, as to whether or not he supports packing the court. Now, with this in mind, recognizing that there's no hypocrisy here, we have to really point out that it's been 152 years since the U.S. Supreme Court was made 9 members. 152 years. As I write in my forthcoming column for the Examiner tomorrow, simply put, no justice will last 152 years on the bench in the same way the court size has remained constant. There is no comparison whatsoever between court packing and what Trump accomplished. Just ask 2 liberal court packing opponents, the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and sitting Justice Stephen Breyer. In truth, this is the fact of the matter. The reason that the Democrats are talking about court packing, that so many of them are interested in packing the court, making it go from 9 justices to 13, presumably with Democrats, is, again, a power grab. The same kind of power grab that justifies their goal of making D.C. the 51st state and giving them 2 additional Senate seats. They would have a 7-6 majority. Why would Democrats want such a large number on the bench? It comes right from FDR's playbook in the 1930s. You see, FDR was very clear about it. Roosevelt was clear in his intent. He wanted a more compliant Supreme Court. He wanted to pack the court because they would otherwise continue to be potentially an impediment to his agenda. And the Democrats are anticipating that very same thing now when it comes to the Supreme Court. Like Jerry Nadler. Jerry Nadler's objective is to amplify a liberal presence on the court so that they have the majority. The Democrats today share the same motivation as FDR. The only difference is FDR was transparent about his reasoning. Here's the fact of the matter, the bottom line. Without question, congressional Democrats' brazenly unconstitutional and utterly antithetical push for D.C. statehood, coupled with their anti-historical and anti-democratic desire to pack the Supreme Court, is a clear power grab. It is a clear indication of their desire to expand their power permanently. Because think about it, 152 years with 9 justices, go to 13, maybe the same thing then. There's so much more that could be said about this. But that's the bottom line. There are real, substantive, significant reasons to oppose both initiatives. And we need to make sure that both are stopped. Because the Republic truly depends upon it. And just a quick little anecdote, the last time we added states was 1959. Alaska and Hawaii. And the perception was that Hawaii would be a Republican state and Alaska would be a Democrat state, and it was a compromise with a Republican president and a Democrat Congress. That spirit of partisan compromise to add states to the Union doesn't seem to be there anymore, even with a 50-50 split in the Senate and a nearly 50-50 split in the U.S. House of Representatives. Keep in mind, Democrats' majority in the House is very slim. We'll keep tabs on this very important issue as things progress.
Talking politics, great for generations. Oh, what mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of no sense.